Good evening from the News Radio 1120 and 93.7 FM KPNW studios. I am Bill London. And tonight's Crazy Oregon News brought to you by Mr. Answer, Sean Sutherland. You know, a lot of people have questions about Medicare. They have questions about Medicaid. They have questions about insurance. Well, then when you have those questions, you need to ask. Just ask. Sean Sutherland of Ask Insurance. Now, that's a clever name, because we all know that many times when you're trying to figure out insurance, what you need to cover, what you don't, a lot of times kind of the feeling is this. And that's why you need Sean. Look at Sean as sort of like your friendly insurance Santa Claus without the overhead. All right, here's a look at the stories we're following. Well, this week, Oregon Governor Tina Kotek proposed to take half of taxpayers' kicker income tax refund because she says, well, we need the money to fight fires. Well, that got a bunch of pushback. And after that, she changed her plan and said, well, she supports holding back the rebates, which go to taxpayers because they've been overtaxed by the state. She changed her plan and said, well, it will only come from high-income earners. Now, that suggests that low-income Oregonians would still get their full kicker tax credits next year if lawmakers go along with the proposal. Now, the question remains, what exactly is defined as higher-income Oregonians? Now, Oregon, as we've reported before, falls below the national average in household income. So if you make more than $44,000 a year, does that make you higher income or not? That question is yet to be answered. Now, like I said, she's getting pushback on this proposal, and she needs to get legislators to go along with it. Well, Oregon House Democrats today, under orders of Democratic House Speaker from Eugene, Julie Fahey, acting at the behest of Governor Kotek, moved Senate Bill 83, which would do away with the controversial state wildfire hazard map. They moved it into the Rules Committee rather than vote on it. Now, Fahey and Kotek are basically using the bill as, well, some would say leverage, I'll say extortion, to take away the taxpayers' kicker to fund fighting wildfires. Like I said, this wasn't on anybody's bingo card, and they really didn't like the idea. The bill, by the way, 83, which unanimously passed the Senate, was expected to do the same thing in the House until the move today. Now, Republicans are criticizing the overt political power play, saying in a statement that Democrats in the House are now using flawed wildfire maps as leverage to take away money from the same people that voted for them. And they said these wildfire maps, as we've reported many times on Crazy Oregon News, those wildfire maps have cost people property values, insurance increases, and a lot of headaches. Republicans in the Oregon House and Senate are proposing major cuts to the Oregon Department of Transportation. They want to cut $146 million from climate initiatives, caps on clean fuels programs, cut $38 million from passenger rail, and create a new office to actually manage large projects, which is something that Oregon just can't seem to figure out how to do, particularly on budget and particularly on time. They say the cuts would allow ODOT to maintain basic services without raising taxes. Now, that plan would need bipartisan support from Democrats to move forward, which is a nice way of saying it won't. Well, Tuesday, May 20th, was Oregon's annual special election. And besides winners and losers, there was another takeaway from Tuesday's election results. A vast majority of voters in Lane and Douglas counties really didn't care. They didn't even bother to send in a ballot or drop it in a ballot box. So turnout was anemic. In Lane County, voter turnout as of today, about 18%. In Douglas County, It didn't even make double digits. It was below 10%. Now, of course, those numbers will change because Oregon's law allows votes to be counted long after Election Day. Oregon has mail-in voting. You drop it in the mail. As long as it's postmarked by sometime on the 20th, it will get counted. But that'll be maybe a week. According to the Secretary of State's office, statewide voter turnout was a whopping 18.7%. All right, now we have covered the Eugene City Council trying to fill a major budget hole and doing it by imposing what was called the fire fee. If you go back and watch some previous episodes, we've talked about this quite a bit. And if you don't recall, that particular fire fee would have raised $11 million a year, and it would be tacked on people's utility bills from eWeb as simply the fire fee tax. All right. It was roundly excoriated. A petition was filed. It was signed by enough people to put it on the November ballot. But by law, the city council has to have a budget in place by July 1st. So how do they do that? Well, originally, as we reported, they had a whole bunch of cuts. Now they're going a completely different direction with a brand new fee. Yep, they're going to try the fee approach to at least, shall we say, lessen the impact from the looming budget shortfall that's been caused by inflation and ever-expanding pension plan pay-ins that are required by every public agency in the state. So now the city council decided, well, we're not going to call it a fee, really. We're just going to increase the stormwater costs on your monthly eWeb bill by 18%. Now, that could take place as early as August 1st, and it would raise about $4.7 million a year in new revenue for the next 6 years. Now, earlier in the year, counselors, like I said, wanted to tack on that fire fee into the eWeb bills. The new scheme is essentially kind of the same, but instead it just raises a stormwater fee as opposed to adding a separate budget line on your bill. So the stormwater fee, hypothetically, would allow the city to continue to fund animal services libraries, the Amazon pool, and the Sheldon Community Center. The fee would or could have sunsetted in 2 years or 4 years, but the majority of the council decided to push it out further, 6 years. According to the city's numbers, the average household is going to pay an extra $350 a month for stormwater fees. Commercial building owners, about $50 a month. Large commercial buildings would pay as much as $670 a month. That said, the $4.7 million doesn't fill the $11 million budget hole. Still possibly on the chopping block, community and business development, homeless programs, sustainability, downtown cleanup, and other community-wide programs. In other words, what they're going to cut is the stuff that's not sexy, like, well, the animal shelter. Now, the other question is, well, what about the fee? And we're talking about the fire fee that's going to be on the ballot in November. All of that could change depending on some factors, including whether the city council will decide to just withdraw the whole idea of a fire fee, which means it wouldn't even go on the ballot, or whether they decide to roll the dice and let the fire fee stay on the November ballot. Then there's the question, well, if that happens, which is a much larger fee, what would happen to the stormwater fee? Will it stay on there? Well, there's been no decisions made on any of that yet, but it's supposed to be discussed, at least in future meetings. Okay, now we told you quite a while ago on Crazy Oregon News about, shall we say, pro-Hamas, anti-Israeli activism in the Portland Public School District, which was essentially being pushed by the teachers union in Portland. And remember, we told you about the booklet that was created for K through fifth graders to teach them things like how to protest, why to protest, and how, well, what was going on in Gaza is a war crime. So a Portland math teacher, a high school math teacher, is now suing the Portland School District, the teachers union, and the school board, alleging they discriminated against him and other Jewish individuals by allowing teachers to distribute and promote anti-Israeli material without any kind of balanced perspective. The suit was filed this week in federal court in Portland, and the teacher is actually an Israeli Jew who complained about the hostile environment in his school and said that the district didn't support him. That according to the suit. It also alleges the practices of the teachers union and the school district violated his First Amendment rights to freedom of association and religion. The Portland School District isn't commenting. Neither is Angela Bonilla, the person behind all of this for the teachers union. Now, the teacher suing alleged that the Portland Association of Teachers, in collaboration with Oregon Educators for Palestine, co-published by guides called Teach Palestine and Know Your Rights. You may remember those. And they held a number of sessions for teachers to learn how to teach and advocate for Palestine within Portland Public Schools. And they did that at the Union Hall in May of 2024. The suit presented as an exhibit one of the union's lesson plans for grades 1 through 5 that describes in a children's workbook the history of the state of Israel. The history was that they were a group of bullies called Zionists. Now, the teacher suing called his school to tell them the forum was one-sided and anti-Israeli rhetoric, and noted that the administration allowed teachers to put Palestinian flags and print out maps of Palestine that eliminated Israel in classrooms across the district. And when he asked if he could display an Israeli flag, he was told, quote, "No, that would be too disruptive." The suit also alleges that the main sources of his harassment were union representatives, and he talked about being physically intimidated by colleagues and people basically harassing him. So while school districts continue to claim that declining enrollment in the state is due to an aging population and low birth rates among millennials, well, Portland Public Schools have finally had to admit the obvious. Parents are pulling their kids out of schools and out of school districts at record numbers. The phrase that's being used by PPS is capture rate. Now, the latest numbers were all put together by Portland State University, and it shows that Portland schools are only capturing 69% of high school students in their particular school district, meaning that of all the kids that would be in high school and that are there within the Portland school district, only 69% are actually going to public schools in Portland. And the capture rate for middle schools is 71%, only a little better, and grade schools is around 75%. So, finally, somebody had to admit what we know, and that is more and more parents are opting out of Oregon's struggling and failing public schools and either going with some form of private school, charter school, or they're just homeschooling. So House Democrats on the House Committee on Labor and Workplace Standards have passed along Senate Bill 426A to the House floor for a vote. That would hold homeowners liable for unpaid wages of subcontractors' employees. And I'll explain this. So if passed, this legislation would make Oregon the first state in the nation to hold owners liable for wages they already paid. For instance, let's say that you go to a new subdivision and you say, I'm going to buy that house. So you go to your bank, you go to your lending institution, and you go through everything. You set up a mortgage and you make your down payment and you now own the home. Well, let's say that the contractor didn't pay the subcontractors. It means that you, the homeowner, who already paid everything, is now on the hook for the unpaid monies to the subcontractors that the contractor skipped out on. By the way, it passed the Senate. A store clerk smacked an alleged shoplifter with a baseball bat after the suspect reportedly left the location without paying for the stuff he was stealing. This happened in Eugene. According to the Eugene Police Department, they received a call on Tuesday at about 7:30 a.m. from a 7-Eleven on West 11th regarding the assault. So the clerk stepped out of the batter's cage and whacked 36-year-old Nicholas Jameson as he was trying to flee the store with stolen items. Now, the suspect, Jameson, was taken to the hospital in an ambulance, and he was cited there for theft. The clerk? The hero of the story? Well, what's the saying? You live long enough that you'll become a villain too. He got fired. Which begs the question, why the hell was there a baseball bat then behind the counter to begin with? And we'll leave it at this. We're 35. We're 35. Oregon is ranked 35th in U.S. News and World Report's list for the 2025 best states in the U.S. The digital media company conducted a study determining which states were best based on the state's healthcare, education, economics, infrastructure, public safety, government, environment, and opportunities. So the state's ranking was a drop from its 2024 ranking as 31st best state in the U.S. as Oregon continues its race to the bottom. So Oregon ranked 5th, at least for infrastructure. That would be things like roads, bridges, high-speed internet. 17th for healthcare. 22nd for fiscal responsibility and stability. 37th for economy. 39th for opportunity. 41st for education. And 44th for natural environment, which is something Oregonians used to take pride in, and also 44th for crime and corrections. As for the natural environment, because that one kind of puzzled me, digging down into the numbers, the state came in 22nd for air and water quality and 46th for pollution and a number of other factors. The top 5 states, Utah, followed by New Hampshire, Nebraska, Minnesota, and Oregon's next-door neighbor, Idaho. And if all goes according to what appears to be planned, Oregon should achieve the goal of being number 50 by the end of the decade. All right, so your crazy Oregon news, of course, brought to you by Sean Sutherland of Ask Insurance. You got a question about your insurance? Just ask, because you may find out he has answers. All right, Rick, time for you to roll out a big old industrial-sized can of condensed real.